Todd, how you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. The topic that we are going to discuss today is a somber one, and it has to do with China and religious freedom and religious liberty. One of the most shocking things that I have seen, and there have been many shocking things to come out of China and what is going on there with religious minorities, is this rewrite of scripture, is that the Chinese Communist Party has taken the Bible and sort of reimagined it in their own lens and worldview. Can you discuss this a little bit and give people a little bit of background on what's going on here?
Yeah, this is a project that the Chinese Communist Party announced in 2019. Now, at the time, they said it would be about a 10-year process, but to release a new translation of the Bible that is more socialist, that is more Chinese, more culturally Chinese. And so they talked about working in some Confucian principles into it, working in some Buddhist principles into it, and really having this new translation that would really support the Communist Party.
I mean, so basically, it's no longer the Bible, it's something else entirely. And I think for those who don't know a lot about this issue, and that's why we're talking about it, what's the motivation? That's the simple question I think people would have. Why would the Chinese Communist Party make a decision to rewrite scripture?
Well, the issue for the Chinese Communist Party is control. It is always about control. And they see the gospel, they see the Christian message as something that would take control away from the Communist Party. If a citizen of China wakes up every morning and thinks, how can I serve the party today? How can I be a good communist today? That's what they want. If you wake up every morning and say, how can I glorify God today? How can I serve Jesus today? They see that as a direct threat to their control. And so they have really encroached on the church, and they have a long history of this. The Three Self-Patriotic Movement, the officially sanctioned Protestant Church of China, has always tried to kind of co-opt Christianity and use it for communist purposes. But they, even in recent years, have taken that a step further. Now it is, your church used to have a picture of Jesus at the front. Let's take that picture of Jesus down. Let's put up a picture of President Xi Jinping. Your church used to sing Christian hymns at the beginning of the service. Let's stop singing those hymns and let's start singing some good Communist Party anthems to start out your gathering. And so this new socialist translation of the Bible is just another step for the Chinese Communist Party as they try to control the church and really co-opt Christianity as a means of controlling the people and helping them serve the party's interests.
Your organization, just to give an example of this Bible rewrite, Voice of the Martyrs, you posted on Facebook recently. It's so shocking to me. An excerpt from John 8, 7 through 11. And I'm just going to read what is here. This was posted in a textbook, I believe, in September of 2020. It reads, Jesus once said to the angry crowd who was trying to stone a woman who had sinned, "He who is without sin among you, let him cast a stone at her." When his words came to their ears, they stopped moving forward. When everyone went out, Jesus stoned the woman himself and said, quote, "I am also a sinner." When I read that to me is one of the most shocking. What was your reaction to seeing that?
Well, in one sense, it's just like so arrogant to think I'm going to rewrite the story of Jesus. I'm going to rewrite that story. But then you think about, denying the deity of Christ. If Jesus is a sinner, then he's not God. The fact that he would stone a woman, where we know that he said, I'm not judging you either. Now go and sin no more. They just so altered the story. And this is just one example of what they are trying to do in this new version. The other thing, though, is questions. How does this, obviously it denies the deity of Christ, but it doesn't make me want to be a communist. So how do they see this as serving the party? The other thing that's interesting, this was released, as you mentioned, in a textbook in 2020. There has been a lot less talk about this new translation from the Chinese government since some of these things became public. And it's almost like as these things became public, they were embarrassed when they were called out on it and called out on, hey, Jesus didn't stone the woman. Jesus didn't say, I'm a sinner. What kind of a translation is this? So it's interesting to see that they have kind of quieted down about this project. And it'll be interesting to see when we start to see more translated passages, if perhaps, they've been embarrassed into being a little more accurate, or if this is just an example of the direction they're going and they're committed to do that all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, if you're only making one version of the Bible legally available and you're putting in a line that says, I am also a sinner, and attributing it to Jesus, it seems like the goal obviously is to dismantle the purpose of Script. They seem to understand what the purpose of the gospel is to some degree. I don't want to give them too much credit, but they seem to understand it because it seems aimed at dismantling it. But one of the things that stuck out to me this past week with the story about Friends, the TV show with China changing certain scenes from Friends and trying to sort of rewrite it because they said it was immoral as a show, was that there were some reactions that were reported from the Chinese people saying, look, we know what you're doing here. We understand. We know English, we understand the language, and you're changing the story. We get it. That was really interesting to me because the hope is that that same understanding would permeate through when it comes to important issues like faith and what Scripture says. And there's a massive underground church, obviously, in China. Can you speak to that a little bit? What is it like to be a Christian in China who really wants to study the real Bible and understand it?
Well, there is a massive underground church. In fact, a Chinese government study several years ago, their document used the figure 120 million Christians in China. And so that's why the Communist Party is so threatened. They know how many Christians there are. They know it's a direct threat to their power. But those who are Christians, one of the challenges is just getting a Bible. The only way you can legally get a Bible in China is at a registered church. And if those are mostly in the big cities, so if you're in a rural area, you have almost no access to Bibles. And when you would go to that church and say, I want one Bible, that's possible. Probably you could get one Bible. If you went to the church and said, hey, my whole Bible study group wants a Bible, I need 10 copies, they would almost certainly say no to 10 copies. And if you said, I want 100 copies, there's no chance that's going to happen. So the Bible is very limited in its availability. It's only through those official channels, and it is limited in how much access people actually have. That's one of the reasons why Voice of the Martyrs and other groups are so committed to delivering Bibles into China, even smuggling Bibles into China, because it's not available. And, one of the things I hope about this new translation is that it will backfire and people will wonder, well, why was it so important for the Chinese government to retranslate the Bible? Why was it so important for them to change this? Let's go back and look at what it originally said, and hopefully it will raise questions in people's minds, and they'll actually want to read the Bible and even want to go back and see what the translation was. So the Lord has a history of working through what some people intend for evil, God can turn for good. And I hope that's what happens with this new translation in China as well.
Yeah, and just a little question coming off of that. The assumption would be that this version that is being rewritten is what would be available at those churches if you went to ask for one, right? If it's a registered church with the communist government.
That is my understanding of what their intent is, that this would replace the previous translation, and now this is going to be the Bible that is legally available in China, including through registered churches.
So Todd, as we round out to a close here, talk a little bit about Voice of the Martyrs. You are a part of a wonderful organization. Talk a little bit about the work that you do, and in particular in China.
Well, one of the things we've already talked about is distributing Bibles, and we are distributing Bibles in every province of China. The people who are involved in that understand that they are risking going to prison for at least 5 years by being involved in the distribution of Bibles illegally in China. We're also involved in supporting the church, supporting church leaders, tools and training and encouragement for them, as well as supporting the family